I might share about how I got involved in non-violent activism as regards Gaza. In 2024, it gradually became clear to me that a genocide was taking place there, as is also confirmed by the International Association of Genocide Scholars, by many humanitarian organizations, and by the United Nations. Despite this alarming situation, the Israeli regime, led by Netanyahu, continued its policy of ethnic cleansing and genocide. Unfortunately, the Dutch, I'm from Holland, and also many other European countries and governments, they remained largely silent and continued to support the Israeli regime economically, politically, academically, and militarily. Critical voices within the Buddhist and the secular mindfulness world also remained largely absent. Some Buddhist and secular mindfulness teachers spoke about Gaza, but then usually in a very general way, like only saying that there is suffering. Well, to my understanding, this suffering was not just general suffering, but really man-made suffering. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented, is said by Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor and also a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Remaining silent in the face of large-scale injustice or violence can contribute to its normalization and strengthen the position of the oppressor. By not speaking up, we easily encourage oppression, we implicitly legitimize injustice. I'm not a politician at all, but as a meditator and a retreat teacher, I do not only practice mindfulness, but I'm also inspired by the 4 divine dwellings, like kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, and also by the 10 perfections. Well, one of them is ethics, and another one is called sacca, which means something like truthfulness, integrity, having a sense of justice. I believe that the international community is very important in such complex situations, because those who live in the area will have less overview than those who are less directly involved. Research explains self-distancing as attributing to wisdom. That's why we seek help from a coach, a therapist, or a mediator. I'm not a very well-known person in the world, but I believe every bit can help. Therefore, I decided to take compassion for the Palestinians to heart, to stand up for their human rights and to not remain silent. With all our publications, we always specifically clarify 2 things. Our criticism was and is not aimed at all Jews or Israelis, but specifically at the genocidal policies of the Israeli government led by Netanyahu, who is charged by the International Criminal Court. And the terrorist attack by Hamas on 7 October 2023 was a traumatic event that must be condemned without question. And of course, Israel had the right to defend itself. Yet, the response of the Israeli regime and army has been completely disproportionate. I started posting more actively on LinkedIn and Instagram, and in July this year my colleague Joost van de Heuvel-Reinders and I published an open letter, Silence is Not Always Golden, in different languages, signed by 7 Vipassana retreat teachers, as a non-violent way of addressing the silence by the Dutch government and the mindfulness community in the Netherlands. In this article, we name some general causes of the silence and some specific Buddhist ones. The general ones, they will not be complete, but I can mention a few. Among some traditionally Christian parties, an old biblical belief is at play, in which the land of Canaan, including Gaza, is seen as the promised land that God assigned to Abraham and his descendants. This fuels a strong, unconditional loyalty to Israel, especially from traditional Christian parties. In this light, criticism of Israel is quickly labeled as anti-Semitic. In addition, a deep sympathy for Jewish people emerged after the horrors of the Holocaust, which is completely understandable. At the same time, it's painful to see how this sympathy is sometimes used to condone or accept violent policies, reversing the historical victim role to a perpetrator role. There are very strong and deep economic, academic, political, and military interests and entanglements with Israel, especially from the Netherlands. In the West, a cultural irrational fear of Muslim religion and culture has emerged, which is stimulated by many extreme right-wing parties. This Islamophobia can easily cause racism, and we don't want to have anything to do with that. And finally, maybe also to mention, collective trauma can influence social silence. Well, these are some general reasons. And we've also named some possible reasons of the silence in the Buddhist world. For example, the word mindfulness in the public sphere has come to refer more to relaxation and self-regulation, and is not so much concerned about ethics and compassionate engagement. Then there's this holy ideal in the Buddhist world, which I'm also trained with as a monk even then, of equanimity, of being neutral and non-judgmental. And in the secular world, to follow acknowledging awareness and patience as holy virtues. That may not always be so helpful. One may easily forget that we can also practice yang or fearless compassion sometimes. And sometimes that's really needed. The interpretation of anger as always being unwholesome or akusala in the Pali language. It may be good to understand that the scriptures also mention a wholesome type of anger, a moral indignation or rage that stems from awareness of injustice. Then there may be the interpretation of existential wisdom, of incontrollability in a fatalistic way. Like, oh, this is happening and it's just as it is. There may be here the serenity prayer by a very old Spanish mystic. Teresa of Avila may be helpful. May I have the serenity to accept what I cannot change, but also to have the courage to change what I can change, and the wisdom to be able to discern. Then there's also sort of a habit, and I'm also speaking about myself, of long-term practitioners, that we can easily develop into very good adapters and pleasers. Always going along with the flow. Oh, yes, yes. And this may also not be always so helpful. And also to mention maybe that we haven't had many courageous examples from Buddhist pioneers in the West, except maybe a few courageous practitioners who I really started to admire, like Bhikkhu Bodhi, Eric Menigian, Kazu Hagu, well, and maybe also the founders of Liberation Circle, or before that also about Gaza resilience. Unfortunately, it's still very unclear how much freedom and right to self-determination there will be for the Palestinian people in Gaza, who have suffered so much from decades of repression and a genocide. Also, the situation on the West Bank and for the Palestinians taken hostage by Israel, including Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, remains very unclear and troublesome. Therefore, it makes sense to me to continue with non-violent activism. Maybe to end this short reading with a part of a poem by Yahya al-Hamarna of The Sound of Birds. I dream one day soon to wake up, me and my neighbors, the kids, to the sound of birds that sing, without the sound of bombs, without an evil and malicious bombing, just the sound of birds. I don't want more than the sound of the birds.